Hi everyone. Good evening. I hope you can all hear me. You're very welcome this evening. We have a few people still joining, so we're just going to wait a few minutes while everyone joins. But just want to say welcome to our virtual tasting of Guigal. You're all very welcome. We have people joining from all over Europe tonight. So I think if I'm correct, we have people joining from Croatia, from Denmark, from Austria. I think we have Lithuania as well. We have Ireland, Germany. So you're all very welcome. There's going to be some people here tonight who know Guigal very well. I know some people have several bottles of Guigal in their cellar that they're dying to drink. And then we have going to have people on the event also who are very new to Guigal, who maybe it's their first time tasting it, and it's going to be a real learning experience. So whichever end of the spectrum you're on, you're very welcome tonight. And it's a real honor to have Guigal here with us. I hope you've all received your tasting kits. We have 6 wines to taste tonight. And these wines were put into the small bottles by Vinové. It's a French company, and Vinové specializes in kind of using this small format. So all of the bottles were put into the small bottles in a special atmosphere, so there was no oxygen touching the wine. So really it should replicate very closely the experience that we would get from a normal 750 ml or Magnum bottle. And I'm sure Philippe can attest to that. He's already tasted them earlier as well. So if you haven't served your wines, I'd invite you to do so now. So if you have 6 glasses, go ahead and pour them. I've poured mine already. So go ahead and do that. The order we're going to taste in tonight is might be slightly different than what you have in your tasting booklet. So we're going to start with the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the Château de Nalys. Then we're going to go to Côte-Rôtie Brune and Blonde. Then the third one will be Côte-Rôtie Château d'Ampuis. And then the 4th, 5th, and 6th will be the famous Lala wines. So those ones are going to be first with La Mouline, second with La Turque, and third with La Landonne. Okay. So if you want to pour those in the correct order, then we can get started. Just some kind of housekeeping. We're going to be here for about an hour this evening, maybe a little bit longer. So we've got 6 wines to taste in an hour. We're going to start off with just an introduction to Guigal. Philippe will introduce himself, Maison Guigal, and then the history. And then we'll start tasting straight away. So don't worry, you won't have to wait too long before we can dive into it. At the end, then we will have a Q&A. So any questions that you have, feel free to pop them in the chat. You can write them down, and then we will answer them at the end or as we go. And if we have time, we can also ask questions out loud by unmuting yourself at the end. Okay, but we'll ask that for most of the event. We're going to keep all of our microphones on mute, so we don't hear any barking dogs, we don't hear any screaming children, and it should be smooth sailing then. Also, I want to remind you that this event is being recorded. That's so that anyone who is maybe joining next week, if they can't join us tonight, I can send them the recording and they can watch it back later. So if anyone would like to watch it back after that, that's no problem. If anyone doesn't want to appear, they can turn off their video. That's no problem at all. But we would love to see your faces, your beautiful faces, and get involved. Okay. Without further ado, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Orla.
Hello, my name is Laura. We work in an international team.
And we're also joined by Rebecca tonight, who is helping us on the technical side. And I think then without further ado, we can introduce Philippe. So I think Philippe is already with us. Philippe, can you introduce yourself, Maison Guigal, and it's all over to you.
Yes, good evening, and good evening, everybody. Well, first of all, let me let me tell you a big thank you for having organized this beautiful tasting of our wines. I hope this is going to be a special tasting for you tonight, but this is going to be a special tasting for me as well, because I'm not used to taste these wines every day. So fantastic moment to come, and a great pleasure to share this tasting with you. My name is Philippe Guigal, and I represent the third generation of owner and winemaker at Guigal. When it is about Guigal, it's about a family, and the family starts with my grandfather Etienne. Etienne is the famous E that you find on the E Guigal. Is a very important character because he's the one who's founded the company, the 1st of January 1946. This is a very interesting moment and a very interesting date because prior the COVID bad moments, I was very fortunate to represent the winery outside France. So I was traveling around the world, meeting a lot of young people, young sommelier, young professionals, and having the same reactions each time. That is to say, young people talking to me and saying, "Oh, you're Philippe Guigal, so you're probably the 10th or the 12th generation of Guigal in the Rhône Valley," which is, of course, absolutely wrong. I represent the 3rd generation, and I used to say that Guigal is a very young company, but will always counterbalance our youth by a very strong dynamism. So my grandfather was extremely dynamic. He was a giant of winemaking. It's always very strange for me to remind people that I had a tremendous grandfather who has vinified 67 vintages in his life. So he dedicated his entire life to winemaking. I feel extremely fortunate to work every day with my dad, Marcel, who's in very good shape. He has celebrated his 62nd vintage last year, vintage 2021. And as you can imagine, I feel extremely young and unexperienced in this family of giants of winemaking. But the good news for you tonight is that I took over the winemaking at Guigal some 30 years ago. So the good news is that the wines we're going to have tonight are my babies. So I should be able to talk about them properly.
Yeah, so it's so interesting that it's the 3rd generation.
Yes, 3rd generation only. And you see these interesting pictures of my grandfather on the right. The one on the corner is the official let's say picture when that has been taken the 1st of January 1946 when my grandfather started his business. And of course you can see harvesting time at the time, which is very interesting because we're in Côte-Rôtie and we're in extremely steep vineyards in the northern Rhône. Nowadays, Guigal kept his 3 activities. That is to say, we own vineyards in North and Southern Rhône. So we own an outstanding property in Northern Rhône of 75 hectares among Côte-Rôtie, Condrieu, Hermitage, Saint-Joseph, and Crozes-Hermitage. We also own a fantastic estate in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Château de Nalys. We'll have a beautiful example tonight. And Château de Nalys is located in the very heart of Châteauneuf-du-Pape with its 77 hectares. And very recently, that is to say just a bit more than 1 week ago, we took over a fantastic property in Tavel, Château d'Aqueria. And this is a beautiful piece of 100 hectares with 40 hectares of Tavel and 30 hectares of Lirac. And thankfully, a lot of forests, which is very interesting in terms of biodiversity and organic farming, which is the way we like to work in our vineyards.
Yeah, congratulations. And so that's converting to be organic or organic already?
It's not organic yet, but straight after the next crop, 2022, we'll start the organic conversion, and we hope to be successful in about 3-4 years to complete the total organic certification.
Okay, then we'll have to taste it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Next one. Great.
In terms of the tasting, do you want me to start talking about the wines? And
yes, why don't we start with our map So maybe we can situate ourselves a little bit better in the Northern Rhone, and then you can show us then. I think because we'll start with Châteauneuf-du-Pape, it's good to see north and south together.
Absolutely. Yes, if you go back to the maps at the beginning of your presentation, I think there is a great overview of the Rhone Valley. So on the left-hand side, you know, the two zooms are north and south, of course, and on the right-hand side, you can see Côte-Rôtie being in the very far north, and of course Châteauneuf-du-Pape being in the heart of the southern part. It's always interesting to remind people that the Rhone Valley is a single region, but there are two poles, the northern part and the southern part. The northern part represents 9% of the volumes, and the southern part is 91%. The good news is that we have a lot of crus and top appellations in the north, and there are of course some crus in the south, the very best appellation being the one we're going to taste, that is to say Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
Yes, and I think that Châteauneuf-du-Pape is probably one of the best known French appellations outside of France.
Absolutely, it's a wine that is exported 75%. So 75% of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape are drunk outside France. And it's interesting also to know that this is the second largest communal appellation surface after Saint-Emilion, and it's slightly bigger than Chablis. So this is a very important appellation for the Rhone Valley, of course.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, let's move on and talk a little bit more about Châteauneuf. We can go on to that.
So you just saw a picture of the Château d'Ampuis, which is the place I'm talking from tonight. I didn't want to stay in the office, so I've been to this place, which is a pretty nice place. And even if it's a very old place, we have a very good Wi-Fi and a very good connection there. So thanks to this building, we're having a good chat tonight.
Great, and probably some of the most photographed vines in the Rhone Valley, I think, behind it.
Yes, it's a beautiful scenery. It's a very nice spot. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So this is the entire Guigal family. That is to say, a small family with my mom and dad on the right and my wife on the left. So yes, we are an extremely small family. My dad was a single child. I'm a single child as well. And with my wife, we have broken the family rules. That is to say, we've given birth to two. So we have twin boys. We have twin boys who are 11 years old. So they have a little bit of time to think of their future, if they want to be in the wine business or not.
Yeah, they have some time before their first harvest.
Absolutely. So this is the first wine, the Châteauneuf-du-Pape Château de Nalys, on the last vintage produced and bottled, that is to say 2019. And it's very important when you look at the map to say that Nalys is located in the very heart of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So you can see the village of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and Nalys is slightly on the right-hand side of the village, in the very heart of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. One piece with 77 hectares, but very fortunately, 4 different terroirs. And we think it's a true richness to have 4 different blocks to express, let's say, the different expressions of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The first one I'm going to talk about is the one surrounding the estate. So it is a place called Grand-Pierre, but nobody calls it Grand-Pierre. People call it Nalys, simply because it's surrounding the estate. And you find the typical soils of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, unique to the appellation, that is to say, the grès rouge du Comtat and the Save. Grès rouge is a mix of sand and clay. It's probably on another slide, not on this one, and it's quite a rich soil. So you can go further, and we might be able to see the grès rouge if you go to the next slide. Yeah. It's gone. Okay, never mind. So
only have to go literally.
No problem. It's a very different type of soil, which is extremely filtrant, and the expression of the wines is extremely elegant and extremely delicate. To express, for those of you that are Châteauneuf-du-Pape fans, the style of these soils, Our closest neighbor, and we have 1.5 kilometer border with this neighbor, is Château Rayas. So it's not part of the Châteauneuf-du-Pape that are very powerful and strong. It's more on the elegance and the delicacy. The second block is the previous picture, and this is the most famous terroir of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. We're talking about Lacroix. So this is the vineyards of Lacroix, where you find these big pebbles, but underneath is clay. And clay is extremely important because this is what is going to give, let's say, a little bit of freshness and a little bit of water to the vines during the very strong and the very dry summers. So this is the block of La Croix. We have 27 hectares of Croix, which is, of course, very important. And next to La Croix is another terroir named Le Bois Sénéchal. This is the pictures that you see here. And the Bois Sénéchal, you find exactly the same pebbles, but the difference is that the clay is much closer underneath. So you can see the clay not very far from the pebbles, and you suffer a little bit less from the drought on the third terroir of the Bois Sénéchal. Last but not least is Le Piélon. And Le Piélon is a mix of pebbles and clay, but it's quite high in altitude. This is, globally speaking, a characteristic of Nalys. Nalys is quite high in altitude, and this is extremely important in terms of balance in the finished wines. You will taste tonight a very classic and quite powerful Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but you will also notice that you don't feel the alcohol too much. It's a Châteauneuf-du-Pape, so no doubt there is alcohol in this wine because it's the story of Grenache and Châteauneuf-du-Pape together. But most important is probably the balance and the mouthfeel you have in this wine. So this is a wine that we like to show to see, let's say, the level of density we can reach in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but not only, also the balance. And you know, an elegance and a structure that can be extremely charming. Nalys currently carries the 13 different grapes of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So in the Château de Nalys 2019, you of course find a majority of Grenache, but the second largest grape here is Syrah. And we have easily 1/3 up to 35% Syrah in the Château de Nalys 2019. We also have a little bit of Mourvèdre, but we also find the Counoise, the terroirs, the Pierdon, and you know, all the different grapes that you can find in Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
And I think that is a good moment to tell everyone that you can begin tasting. So I think you'll all have poured your wines by now. So without further ado, we'll taste our first wine. So this is a 2019.
This is absolutely 2019, and these wines have been bottled the last days of January. So it's quite a recent bottle.
Okay. And how was that vintage? How would you describe it? Was it typical of Châteauneuf?
We can say it's typical of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. We can also say it's a good to very good vintage for the Southern Roll. I have to confess that we have been extremely fortunate with the past vintages. The series starts with 2015, which was truly great, followed by 16, which was especially outstanding in Châteauneuf. 17 was fine, 18 was great, 19 is superb, and 2020 is outstanding. So you have 6 vintages in a row that are extremely interesting in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. You probably noticed that I've not talked about 2021, because 2021 is not reaching the level of quality of the previous 6 vintages. So the difference will be made, let's say, with the quality of the terroirs and the quality of the vigneron in 2021. But generally speaking, you know, from 2015 up to 2020, you find outstanding vintages in the Rhone.
And I have another question, if I can. How many years can you keep this wine in the cellar?
As you can see, this is a wine that shows a lot of expression, typical expression of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, with its warmth, with its opening, but it's also a wine that has real tannins. We can say it's quite powerful for Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and this is a wine that will easily age for the next 15 years, 15 or 20 years. So you can definitely cellar it in your cellar without problem.
Okay. It's really powerful, but I find that it's really balanced. It's really elegant and sophisticated as wine.
Absolutely, it's something that was very important to us. We really suffer from the global warming in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and our obsession is balance, simply because our selection and taking over the Château de Nalys, a major point was the altitude. And with the altitude, you naturally are a little bit colder than on the lower part of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. We're talking maybe about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius difference, which is very little, which sounds very little, but in terms of the final balance of the wine, the maturation of the grapes, it's quite important. So Nalys has always been well known for the quality of the white wines, and it's exactly for the same reason. We can keep more freshness, we can keep more balance on the whites, and of course we are doing our best nowadays to keep this balance for the reds. And let's say one key or one solution might be to use other grapes than Grenache. A lot of people have been extremely focused on Grenache in the past 20 years and forgot maybe a bit too much the Mourvèdre or other grapes, and also forgot the fact that it is perfectly allowed to add a little bit of white grapes in the red Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And sometimes 1 or 2%, of a white grape can give, a little bit of acidity and bring a little bit of balance to the finished red wine. So we are extremely happy, let's say, to play with this spectrum of grapes out of 4 different terroirs, which of course gives a lot of combination every year.
Wonderful. And I think if anyone wants to add in the chat their tasting notes or ask any questions, that's fine, into the chat. And otherwise, we can move on to our second wine.
Yes.
So we have the Côte-Rôtie Brune and Blonde.
Absolutely. So this is the Côte-Rôtie Brune Blonde 2018. Before talking about Côte-Rôtie and describing the wine, I would like to share a funny information with you. I've done my education in Burgundy, so I'm graduated from Dijon University. And when you visit estates in Burgundy, you are very warmly welcomed by the producers. And most of the time you go through horizontal tasting. That is to say, you select a vintage and you taste the different crus, Premier Crus and Grand Crus in Burgundy from the same vintage. And that's what we call horizontal tasting. If you visit Bordeaux, you have one Grand Vin from the Chateau and you go through the vertical tasting. My idea with you tonight was to share a very personal concept, which is the diagonal tasting. So I have chosen to start with Nalys 2019 from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and then we'll follow with the Brune Blonde 18. We'll have the Château d'Ampuis 17, and we'll finish with the single vineyards La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne 16, so that you can see different vintages in different situations. So it's a very personal concept, but I think it's also an idea, let's say, to see different things during a shop tasting. So back to Côte-Rôtie. Côte-Rôtie is a specialty. It's our specialty at Guigal, and I'm sure if I take a little bit of my blood here, there's a little bit of Côte-Rôtie in it. So it's our DNA, if I may say. And when we talk about Côte-Rôtie, we talk about an appellation which is the northest appellation of the entire Rhône. And it's a tiny appellation of 330 hectares today. And it's very important to explain people that we have 2 different terroirs in Côte-Rôtie, or 2 different sites, 2 different locations that I'm happy to talk about tonight. We have the southern part of the appellation, mentioned under the name Blonde, and we have the northern part of the appellation mentioned under the name Brune. And of course, if you open a book talking about Côte-Rôtie, you will reach and read the beautiful legend. And the legend says that at the 16th century time, which is the time this castle was built, the owner of the Château d'Ampuis, who was the Marquis de Maugiron, would have had 2 daughters. One blonde-haired girl And when she got married, he decided to give her half of his vineyard, the Côte Blonde, and one brunette. And when she got married, he decided to give her the other half, the Côte Brune. So this is what is fantastic about legends. That is to say, everybody can easily remember the story with the blonde and the brunette. If I'm with you tonight, it's probably to go a little bit further and to tell you about the differences in the terroir between the southern part of the appellation, the blonde, and the northern part, the brune. Southern part of the appellation, we have a mother rock made of schists. And schist is what you find, generally speaking, in Côte-Rôtie. It's a geological exception. Most of the other vineyards in Northern Rhone are granite-based. Côte-Rôtie is schists-based. And the blonde part in the south shows schists underneath, but limestone and silica on the surface. And Syrah growing on limestone is always an elegant Syrah, a sophisticated Syrah, a delicate Syrah. So the wines from the Côte Blondes are always extremely fine wines. Moving to the Côte Brune, that is to say the northern part of the appellation, the northern you'll go, the more you'll find clay on the top of the schists. And very important, you'll find two components that are iron oxide and manganese. And these two components are providing extra phenolics to the wines. And by extra phenolics, I mean extra anthocyanins, more color, extra tannins, more power, of course. And it's like, you know, everything has been made for the blonde to be very blonde and the brune to be very brune, simply because you probably know that we have the capacity or the availability to use a little bit of Viognier within the Syrah in Côte-Rôtie. And of course, there is more Viognier on the Côte Blonde than on the Côte Brune. So it's another way for the blondes to be blondest and for the brune to be brunest. There are exceptions, of course, and tonight I will mention the different percentages of Viognier in each of the wines we will taste. So this first wine is the Côte-Rôtie Brune et Blonde, and as you can easily guess it, it's a mix of the southern part and the northern part of the appellation. Our motto for this wine is, of course, to show the elegance and the sophistication of Côte-Rôtie through the nose of this wine. But when you taste it, you have, of course, some tannins and you have a balance that shows that Côte-Rôtie can always be quite powerful with good tannins and wine's definitely able to age.
And I think we can all begin tasting that now.
So the nose is very expressive. 2018 is quite a generous vintage in terms of the aromatic expression. And of course, you find, you know, these tannins that are sophisticated tannins. You know, there's been a very typical work done on this wine, which is, we can say, a speciality of our winery. That is to say, this Côte-Rôtie has spent 36 months in oak barrels. And when we mention 36 months, it sounds far too much. That is to say, on the paper, 3 years in barrels is a lot of time. You will quickly understand, knowing each other a little bit better, that I don't care about the paper. I care about the wine. And of course, when you taste this wine, you find that this long aging has brought an interesting shape in the tannins. The tannins are there. It's definitely a wine that can age for another 10 or 15 years, but there is no aggressivity on the tannins. The tannins are extremely well educated or sophisticated, if we can say. So I like the word educated because in French we use the word élevage, and élevage is close to education or breeding, if you prefer. So this is truly what we like to do at Guigal. For your records, the Côte-Rôtie Brune et Blonde, 50% of the wine is in new oak and 50% is in second rotation oak cask. A lot of people are surprised, if not amazed, by a wine spending so much time in oak. We have a little secret, but it's not exactly a secret because I'm sharing it with you tonight. We are the only estate in the Rhône Valley that has its own cooperage. So we make our barrels from A to Z. We will select, of course, the forest where we want the barrels to be from. We will dry, you know, the oak. It's 3 years outside natural drying. Then we will, you know, toast the staves, etc., etc. And this cooperage is here at the Château d'Ampuis. It's an extremely small cooperage, but we make 5 barrels every day, which means between 850 and 900 New York barrels a year. And this is covering our needs. 900 New York barrels sounds a lot, but in our cellars, we have a total of 5,000 barrels. So you quickly realize that we don't have New York barrels only. We have second rotation and third rotation oak barrels, of course, and we can use our barrels up to, I would say, 8-9 years maximum. Of course, it will very much depend in, you know, the tannins in order to match the perfect kind of barrels we're going to use. And there is no rule, no specific rule in advance. We'll always match, you know, the tannic structure of the wine with the type of barrel we're going to use.
And Philippe, how long have you had your own cooperage?
So we started our own cooperage in 2003. But what's interesting for you know, collectors to hear tonight is that we have started the long-term oak aging, the way we do it today, in the early 60s. So it's not exactly a recent story. And the first vintage of La Mouline, for example, which is 1966, has been aged during 40 months in New York barrels. So nothing has changed very much.
Okay. And for the small part of Viognier, what does Viognier bring to this wine? What does it bring? What does it change?
Absolutely. Well, there are 2 answers. One is the expected answer. Viognier is, of course, the grape of Condrieu. And if you tasted a Condrieu in your life, you've seen a very aromatic wine. And of course, the Viognier expresses through aromatics, white peaches, apricots, lychees, exotic fruits. So you can imagine the aromatic impact of the Viognier when it's blended to the Syrah. This is what people expect. There is something that is even more important to me. It's the textural impact of the Viognier in the Côte-Rôtie. And when I talk with my friends in Australia, you know, there's a strong fashion in Australia to blend Shiraz with Viognier. If I talk with the chief winemaker of Yalumba, for example, Louisa Rose, we both agree that, okay, there might be an aromatic impact, but the most important impact is definitely in the texture of the wine, you know, in the mouthfeel when you taste these wines blended with Syrah, Shiraz, or Viognier.
Great, thank you.
We have some questions.
I think many of the questions are already answered.
Yeah,
we have everyone writing in that they really enjoyed the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, as did I. Very good.
And I have only one question left concerning the aging in new and old oak. The percentage changes every year.
So it does not change from one year to another, simply because the Viognier is authorized or allowed in Côte-Rôtie as a field blend. So once it is planted, it stays planted, of course. And when we'll go to the single vineyards, I will go for extremely precise percentages of Viognier, and people are like, okay, maybe from one vintage to another it can be 1% more, 1%. No, it's not, because once you've counted the vines once in the vineyard, because Viognier stays Viognier and Syrah stays Syrah, it stays extremely constant. In the Brune Blanc, we have around 3 to 4% Viognier, simply because the volumes make that, you know, there can be a 1% variation. But you know, we will move to the Côte-Rôtie Château d'Ampuis, and in the Château d'Ampuis we have 7% Viognier, and there is physically 7% of Viognier planted among the Syrah, so the percentages stays constant.
Thank you.
So you have a great view of the Côte Blonde here. And now it's time to talk about the Château d'Ampuis. It's of course a special feeling. I am in the Château d'Ampuis right now, and we talk about a wine called Château d'Ampuis to express the fact that on this land of legend, we have historical vineyards. Out of the historical vineyards, we have three single vineyards, La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne, that we will taste afterwards. But we have other historical vineyards that we wanted to highlight or to show, to express. And this is the plots that have been chosen to produce the Côte-Rôtie Château d'Ampuis. So if I have to describe this wine within one sentence, I would simply say that this is the selection of our very best vineyards, literally touching or surrounding La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne. That is to say, we do not only own these specific single vineyard, we also own the surrounding plots most of the time. So technically speaking, in the Château d'Ampuis, we have three vineyards very close from La Mouline, named La Garde, Le Clos, and La Grande Plantée. We also own the three vineyards literally surrounding La Turque on the three sides, that are La Pommière, Le Pavillon Rouge, and Le Moulin. And eventually a seventh one, a little bit northern, literally touching La Landonne. These 7 vineyards are picked separately. They are vinified separately. They are aged separately during 38 months in New York barrels only. And they are blended at the very last moment, just before the bottling. And this is how we make Côte-Rôtie Château d'Ampuis every year. It's important for me to show Château d'Ampuis in such a tasting, simply because when we launched the first vintage of Château d'Ampuis in 1995, it was not very clear in the mind of the people whether Château d'Ampuis was a super Côte-Rôtie Brune Blonde or a mini La. After all these years, it's now extremely clear that Château d'Ampuis is an outstanding wine. So it's definitely the quality of Château d'Ampuis is closer to the quality of the single vineyards than the quality of the Brune Blonde. So it's of course a very different price, and I think it's a bottle that people are more and more enthusiastic with, because you see one of the very top Côte-Rôties for a price that is softer than La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne, and a production that stays quite small, because all together the production of Château d'Ampuis is close to I would say 25,000 bottles, more or less. So it stays a confidential production.
On the nose on this one, I think the fruits are slightly darker fruits. So in our earlier wines, we had much more red fruits, and I think now we have much more blackberry, we have prune, a little hint of vanilla, but much darker fruits than in our other ones. But you get that long, elegant finish. It's really, really nice. Yeah.
I very much agree with the dark fruits, and there's something interesting about the vintage, that is to say 2017. An important characteristic of 2017 is the fat tannins. So you have a lot of tannins, but the tannins are not hard. They are fat. They are rich. They are quite soft, and I think it's a very interesting balance once again between the richness and the dark fruits in the nose and the mouth that is there's a good mouthfeel in this one.
Yeah, that really leaves you wanting more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The small bottles are too small.
Sure. You can feel the tannins in the mouth, but you have a long finish with spicy notes, a little bit of black pepper. So it's really elegant as wine.
We have a question coming in about if you fear global warming increasing the alcohol in red Rhone wines, and do you think that if so, that would make them less appealing?
I will have two different answers. I will start with the Southern Rhone, where global warming is a true nightmare. So we do everything we can to fight against global warming. It's our choice selecting Nalys higher in altitude. It's our choice, using the secondary and the tertiary grapes. So it's something we think absolutely all the time. Regarding the Northern Rhone, I will have an extremely non-academic answer. And it's just the answer of a winemaker working every day in Côte-Rôtie. And I would like to take a very simple example. I was born in 1975, and I do remember the harvests in 1985. I was 10 years old, the age of my kids more or less, and I can tell you exactly how the vintage 1985 has been made. That is to say, we've started to pick the grapes at the beginning of October. Beginning of October here in Northern Rhone means after the equinox. And equinox in Northern Rhone brings rain. So we've picked the grapes in 1985 after the rain. So there's been dilution, of course, but there were good things in the grapes, making that after chaptalization, because we've probably picked the grapes around 11.5% potential alcohol, and we've chaptalized up to 13. We've made outstanding wines in 1985. And this is a very highly regarded vintage in purpose. It's a beautiful wine. Let me talk about 2017, for example. 2017, we've picked the grapes around the 12th, 15th of September. Yeah. That is to say, almost 1 month in advance, a little bit less, let's say 20 days in advance, but very important, before the equinox. That is to say, before the rain. And the grapes we've picked were between 13 and 13.5% potential alcohol. So we've not chaptalized. Can you ask me which is my favorite way to make wines between 1985 chaptalization and 2017 non-chaptalization? I will have a very non-academic answer. So the Northern Rhone is currently in a situation where we cannot cry too much about global warming, because we're convinced that we are producing balanced wines and probably better than what we were doing 30 or 40 years ago, simply because we have more sun and it's easier to get a phenolic ripeness and to get physiological maturity as well. Of course, it should not carry on like this forever, because otherwise we will pick the grapes at 14, 15 or 16% alcohol in 20 or 30 years, and it could be an issue. But right now, it is very difficult to blame the global warming for the quality of the Northern Rhone wines, because the quality is higher than ever, and the balance is currently extremely good.
Okay. Well, thank you for your very honest answer. Academic and non-academic.
So if we don't have any more questions on the Côte-Rôtie Châteauneuf-du-Pape, it might be a good timing for me to start talking about the 3 single vineyards, La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne. So as you kindly said it at the beginning of the tasting, I insisted to change the order in the tasting. And you could wonder why, but once you will have tasted the wine, it will appear extremely clear to you. If I may, I'm happy to give a presentation of the 3 wines in a row, and we will take time to come back to the 3 wines, let's say for the tastings, and see the different characteristics, because of course the game for people is to compare La Mouline with La Turque and La Landonne, and the tasting order will appear extremely clear in this case. First wine, Côte-Rôtie La Mouline. La Mouline is a very small parcel located in the very heart of the Côte Blondes. So we're talking about the southern part of the appellation, with the schists, the limestone, and the silica. Okay. Interestingly, this is the oldest vineyard of the entire Côte-Rôtie appellation. So we have here an average age of the vines of 90 years old, and we still have vines dating back 1893. That is to say, the very first plantations after the Philippe crisis Côte-Rôtie. So we're talking about French vines on American rootstocks, definitely on American rootstocks, but the very first plantations after the Philippe crisis in Côte-Rôtie. You have a beautiful picture of La Mouline here that will help me for the next comments. La Mouline has got a very special and a very unique shape. You can guess through this picture the shape of a Roman amphitheater, that is to say, a round shape. And of course, this shape is extremely interesting in terms of maturation, because within a very short distance, you have vines facing south and vines facing southeast, with different exposures, with slightly different maturities. And this is, of course, a plus in terms of complexity in a small vineyard such as La Mouline. Something very impressive is these walls. Well, you'll be happy to hear tonight that these walls are precisely 2,400 years. That is to say, they have been built by the Romans at the Roman time. And it's a fantastic vineyard where we grow grapes and make wines for the past 2,400 years continuously. There's never been any stop in La Mouline or in the sector of Côte-Rôtie, generally speaking, in Côte-Rôtie. So this vineyard is a living museum, and for me, it's really a worldwide opportunity. It's something that is very, very emotional. We are in the heart of the Côte Blanche, so there is 11% of Viognier in La Mouline, and of course, 11% is a significant percentage. This Viognier is mixed within the Syrah, so I cannot show you on this picture where the Viognier is because it's perfectly mixed with the Syrah. And last but not least, but this is unfortunately a bad news to finish with, La Mouline is a small vineyard. So what you see on this picture in front of you is precisely 1 hectare. And 1 hectare means 5,000 bottles. So if everything goes well, no frost, no hail, we produce 5,000 bottles of La Mouline every year. And as you can imagine, it's a little nightmare to sell these 5,000 bottles all around the world to the different customers, because we have a little bit more demand than what we can produce. It's a historical wine, of course. We produced the first vintage of La Mouline in 1966 for Guigal, but of course there were a production of La Mouline before Guigal, and it's very interesting to see, let's say, a historical part of Côte-Rôtie with a continuous work for more than 2,000 years. We can, in terms of presentation, I'm going to switch to La Turque. And La Turque, through its label, you can guess that it's a different story. You have a modern label, and this vineyard is the story of a renaissance. That is to say, La Turque was a historical and well-known vineyard at the beginning of the past century. But for various reasons, people started to stop working these vineyards after the vintage 1935. So there is an existing production of Côte-Rôtie La Turque before 1935. And we've taken the decision to replant La Turque in the early 80s, in 81. And the first vintage of the new Côte-Rôtie La Turque is 1985. So there is a gap of 50 years between 35 and 85 for the production of La Turque. The location of the vineyard is interesting because it's not on the low parts of the hillside. It's not on the top of the hillside. It's right in the center. And it's a unique vineyard that catches the very first rays of sun early in the morning, as well as the very late in the afternoon or in the evening. So it's a maximum exposure for La Turque. And you might have heard this before in the viticultural world. We used to say that you can recognize the quality of a terroir when it's snowing, because the vineyards where snow melts first are the very best vineyards. Well, La Turque is the vineyards where the snow melts first. So it's a fantastic exposure. It's facing south, and it's a maximum exposure to the sun as well. On this vineyard of La Turque, so between the Guigal panel and the top, you have 7% of Viognier, once again co-planted as a field blend. And last but not least, it's a small vineyard that is slightly smaller than 1 hectare. So in a normal vintage, we would produce around 4,800 bottles of La Turque. So it stays a very confidential, a very small production. Okay. La Turque, and we'll see this through the tasting later, is a wine that has a lot of energy. It's a vibrant wine, and it's a different expression compared to La Mouline, which is extremely elegant, extremely delicate. La Mouline, we are almost in the world of Burgundy. La Turque, we're definitely in the world of Côte-Rôtie, with finesse, elegance, but also power. The third one, the last one, will be the Côte-Rôtie La Landonne. And when we talk about La Landonne, we talk about an impressive vineyard of 2.3 hectares, located a little bit northern La Mouline and La Turque. So the picking time difference between Mouline and Landonne is around 10 days, more or less. And you see this impressive vineyard of La Landonne here, that is to say a strict slope of 100%, that is to say 45 degrees. There is no Viognier there, so it's 100% Syrah wine. And once again, we've made everything for La Landonne to be very Brune or very powerful, as La Landonne is never distilled. So we use, whole clusters for La Landonne. It comes with the stems every year, of course. When you look at the density of the wine, and just by looking at the color, you can guess it's a wine that has a lot of power, a lot of structure. And as a joke, I could say that this is the most Pauillac of all the Côte-Rôties with its frame and its body. An interesting story about La Landonne. La Landonne is a vineyard that has been physically planted by my dad, Marcel, to celebrate the birth of the new baby in the family. And I was the new baby, of course. So I was born in January 1975, and La Landonne has been planted in January 1975. So interestingly, during the first 30 years, you do a little bit of green harvest because you want to control the yields and the production. But after 47 years, like today, you don't need to do green harvest, and you're starting to have all vines, which is, of course, very interesting in terms of the expression of the wine. It's the largest of the three, 2.3 hectares. So we have a production of about 12,000 bottles of La Landonne every year. So altogether, La Mouline plus La Turque plus La Landonne is almost equal to the production of the Château d'Ampuis. So it also explains the difference in the prices, and more important, in the availability, because pricing is an issue, of course, but not only. It's difficult. It's still very difficult to find bottles of La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne because such a small production.
And Philippe, you've chosen that we're tasting all three as 2016. Why did you choose 2016?
2016 is a great vintage to me, simply because the balance is so classic in 2016 that you're not tasting the vintage very much. You're tasting the terroir a lot. If the same wines in 2019 are extremely powerful, and you would find a Mouline that has probably more tannins than usual. The same wines in 2017, because of the fat tannins I was talking about, highlights La Turque for me. In 16, I think it's extremely interesting to taste the three wines on the right order, because you will find an elegant and delicate Mouline. You will switch to a Turque that is as I said, vibrant, that has a lot of energy, a Côte Brune with more spices as well, and finish, of course, with La Landonne, that has this weight, that has these tannins, that has this power, this nose, with black aromas. So you can talk about tar, you can talk about licorice, you can talk about a lot of things, but always black in color, always dark in color. So it's quite interesting to taste them for the first time on the right order: Mouline, Turque, Landonne. And if you try to go back to La Mouline after La Landonne, suddenly you miss a little bit of something because you've gone for the most powerful to the most elegant. So I always prefer, to have them on this order first.
I think the order is really making sense.
Because we have a really powerful nose with the La Landonne. As you said, we have a lot of black fruits, and we tasted it before, and we found a lot of blackberry, and I found it's strange, but when I found an aroma of skin of blackberry too, it's really, I can't describe it, but it reminds me the skin of the blackberry, and a lot of spices note too,
and even slightly floral, I think, as well. We had a hint of violet. In La Mouline.
Yes, absolutely. It's wine. What's interesting about these three wines is that they are extremely transparent to their terroirs. And for those of you that have experienced these wines, the three wines at the same time on another vintage, it's quite easy, as a blind tasting, to say this is La Mouline, this is La Turque, and this is La Landonne, because the order we see tonight, and these different expressions between the finesse, the elegance of La Mouline, the fine tannins of La Mouline, the spices of La Turque, and of course the power of La Landonne, this will be, let's say, the same expression with, of course, different tones on the different vintages, but it's quite easy, if you have a chance to have them next to each other the way we saw it tonight, to recognize them once you've done the experience once. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. Obviously, it's an honor and delight to have you on tonight, but I think that we can really see that now, tasting them in the order, comparing them to each other, how special it is to be able to do that side by side, and to be able to do it in that format. We have a question from Costas coming in. He said he recently bought La 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 from 2006, and he's going to do a tasting in a couple of weeks. What can you tell us about that vintage? And since there is also an element of the aging too, so yes, so it's obviously older, 10 years older than what we're tasting now. And should he keep the same order?
So if he's planning to open these three wines during the same evening, yes, the order can be kept, of course. Surprisingly, there are similarities between 2016 and 2006, because 2006 was another vintage that was extremely well balanced. It's been forgotten a little bit because of 2005, and 2005 was a great vintage, except that too many people forgot that the wines should wait. And especially in 2005, I think too many people drank the 05 too early. These are beautiful wines, but extremely tannic, extremely powerful, and sometimes a little bit close. 2006, it will see, elegance. It will see opening. So I'm sure it's going to be a great evening. I have another important thing to tell regarding decantation and opening of these wines. La Mouline, La Turque, and La Landonne spent 40 months in New York barrels. So when we say 40 months in New York, people hear a lot of oak. That is to say, in the tasting, a lot of vanilla, etc. As an enologist, I hear something different. I hear a lot of oxygen. So these wines have probably seen more oxygen than most of the top wines of Burgundy or Bordeaux. And it's important because these wines shouldn't be decanted or shouldn't be treated like first growth Bordeaux. My feeling is, in terms of decantation, is that it's always better to do a little bit less than a little bit too much, because once you've done a little bit too much, it's too late. You cannot go backwards. If you've done a little bit less, you can wait another 5 minutes, which is far enough time, let's say, to have another dimension and another opening. So my recommendation for 2006 would be, for example, to open the bottle half an hour before pouring it and gently decant it. Why decanting it? Simply because these wines, after 40 months, didn't go through any kind of fining nor filtration. So it is very classic for Guigal wines to have quite a lot of deposits in the bottles. It's very normal, of course, and decantation for me is a way to, let's say, do something nicer on the tables. It is true that in our family, we rarely decant the wines. We prefer to open a little bit in advance, and we could, let's say, splash at the last minute the bottle in the decanter. But my advice is always, when you don't know about decantation, let's do a little bit less than too much.
Great, and straight on to another question. We have Johan who said they're amazing wines, and maybe you already mentioned it, but how much whole cluster in the different lalas, and does it vary between vintages, how much you include, if there is any?
So as you probably guessed it, I am a big fan of whole clusters. The terroir of La Landonne makes that we can keep the stems every year. You know, it's picked 10 days after most of the Côte-Rôties, and the stems are ripening, so it's not an issue. It is true that depending on the vintages, I can do different things on La Mouline and La Turque, or Château d'Nalys or Brune Blonde. When we talk about these 3 vintages, 18 for the Brune Blonde, 17 for the Château d'Nalys, and 16 for the Lalas, Mouline and Turque, we've kept 25% of the stems. So we've kept 1/4. It's partial destemming, and the main reason is technical, so maybe a little boring, but I'm happy to share it with you. When you start filling the vat, and when you put, let's say, whole clusters at the bottom of the vat, you have these whole clusters and the stems that are acting like a filter next to the place where you will pump the wine and do the first pumping overs. And if you destem everything, you know, these filters, if you can say, are almost blocking the place next to the pipe, and your first pumping overs are probably less efficient when it's destemmed grape compared to non-destemmed grape. So I always prefer to start the filling of a vat with whole clusters at the bottom of the vat. And it's a way for me, let's say, to do better work straight away when we do the first pumping overs. So this is classical for me to keep 20-25% of the stems. There are vintages where I could go up to 50 or 60%, let's say, in extremely ripe vintages. I'm thinking of 2003, for example, where I've kept quite a lot of stems. And there are vintages where I can destem everything except in La Landonne. But in 2008, for example, Brune Blonde, Château d'Nalys, Mouline and Turque have been destemmed 100%.
Okay. I also have another question. Thank you for that technical answer. I have another question that came in separately from Cameron. He said he was recently at the Marché d'Ampry, and most wines being shown there are 2019 or 2018 vintages, which are, he said, incredibly closed and tight, making it challenging to see through and judge quality and ageability of wines. So do you have any suggestions on exactly what to look for in such Côte-Rôties when you're tasting them so young? How do you determine those with aging potential?
It's a very good question, of course, and it's a tricky answer. You know, according to the terroirs, so where these wines are made, we have an idea of the aging possibility or capacity. I would say this is a very strong point of our philosophy at Guigal. When I take the time to age the wines minimum 36 months for the Brune Blonde, I do this not to change the quantity of tannins, but to change the quality of the tannins. And it is true that our wines always show better, nicer, probably more sophisticated in the youth because of this long-term aging policy that we have. And it's linked to the fact that, you know, we're doing this for many years, as I told you, but in the past, it was possible to go in a restaurant and order a bottle of wine that was 20 years old. Nowadays, you sell a bottle of wine to a restaurant, a 2018 Brune Blonde, and you can be sure that the next day it's on the wine list. So there are no restaurants that age the wines anymore. It's now, let's say, the role of private consumers to do this in their cellars. Once again, I'm not changing the quantity of tannins, so our wines are aging extremely well, but a lot of people are opening these wines too young, and I believe these long-term oak aging policies make that the wines are a little bit more charming than they could be. And this is probably the impression that you know, this gentleman had when he visited the Marché au Vin in Côte-Rôtie. A lot of wines are too young, absolutely too young. So one answer could be patience.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one. Do we have any more questions coming in? Which vintage would you drink now, Philippe?
I'm going to sound extremely snobbish and apologize for this in advance, but it is true that we make these wines, especially the single vineyards, to reach, you know, a lot of time and to go through ages. So it's going to sound extremely snobbish, but the first vintage of La Landonne is 1978. It's been planted in 75. So 1978 is the first vintage of La Landonne. What can I tell you? If you have a chance to drink this wine today, you find a wine that is showing extremely well. You know, the tannins are brought to a level of sophistication that is, for me, truly outstanding. It's also true that I like old wines. So yes, you can take a lot of time for the Côte-Rôties. I am in charge at the winery of people that are not happy with their tasting. So if you call to the winery and say, I'm disappointed with, most of the time you talk with me. I never talk with people explaining me that they've opened a bottle of Guigal and the wine is too old. So a lot of people drink the wines, you know, early or far too early, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's important to know what you like in a wine. That is to say, I sometimes had very strange conversations with people looking at the technical note of the Côte-Rôtie, for example, where it's written that you can age this wine for 12 or 15 years. And they call me after 15 years and said, okay, I like the wine, but I don't find the fruits. Okay, after 15 years, you're not expecting the fruit. So if you like the fruits, it would have been better to open it after 5 years, because after 5 years, you still have fruits and you start to see the aging, etc. So I used to say it's very important to know what you like in old wines and stop at the right moment.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question here, which is another technical one. So Lauren has been reading up on Jamie Good's work on Brett. He emphasizes the role of oak cask aging on the chance of Brett. So what's your attitude towards Brett itself, and do you find it poses a problem in your cooperage?
Oh, it's an interesting question, but it's a little bit too simple asked this way. That is to say, if Brett were directly linked to oak barrels, I think there would be a lot of wineries around the world that would be in big trouble. Brett is of course something extremely difficult and extremely bad. I am myself extremely sensitive to Brett, so it is something I truly dislike in wines. Brett is a yeast that you can catch at absolutely every level. That is to say, you can catch Bretts in the vineyards at the very beginning. So when you pick the grapes originally in the vineyards. So of course, people think of bread with oak when oak barrels are not treated well or nicely. That is to say, if we know that if the pH of a wine is too high, if the level of sulfur is too low, if the acidity is too low, there are possibilities, and it's not 100% of the time true, of course, but there are possibilities for breads to develop. I would say we're very strong on this, simply because we have our own cooperage. And having your own cooperage, you have a maximum control of the quality of your barrels. Plus, we're extremely careful on this. So if I give you an answer for Guigal, bread has never been an issue, and bread should never be an issue, because we're extremely careful in what we do in terms of, you know, barrels, cleaning the barrels, rinsing, etc., etc.
Okay. Philippe, we've mentioned a few times tonight about global warming. I believe that Guigal has the HVE certification, which is the high environmental value certification. Can you talk to us a little bit before we finish up, because we are running out of time, about sustainability and maybe if you have any plans for the future?
Absolutely. All our vineyards are HVE3 certified. I'm talking about the 75 hectares of vineyards in Northern Rhône, as well as Château de Nalys and Château d'Aquerria. The difference between North and South is that going to the next step, which is of course an organic certification, is something that is not very difficult in the South. So I'm happy to tell you that in 2023, we will have the first vintage of Château de Nalys certified as organic farming. We will also start the certification for the Château d'Aquerria straight after the crop, so in October this year. For the Northern Rhône, we're moving forward, but probably slower, simply because when you technically speak about organic certification, there is one rule that is extremely simple. If you want to work properly, you know, taking care of your vines with sulfur and copper, the rule is that you should be able to visit all your parcels within 24 hours. So the reaction delay for a good practice in organic farming is 24 hours max. At Nalys, because it's flat, because we have machines, etc., we are currently able to cover the 77 hectares of Nalys in 20 hours. So you understand that it's very possible. At Aquerria, we will do the investment because it's flat as well. So it's a matter of tractors and people. We will do the investments to be able to get the same figures. In Northern Rhône, 75 hectares of land, 37 vignerons. It's a lot of people because it's very steep and it's a lot of work. Currently, we're closer to 28 hours. Okay, so we're not exactly top to go through organic certification. We have some vineyards in Northern Rhône that are already organic without certification, and for the others, we're moving forwards. It's going to take a little bit more time because it's very tricky to do this in the strict slopes of the Northern Rhône. It's also important to say that we are in a precision, or I should say a viticulture of precision in Northern Rhône. And this viticulture of precision is moving forward quite fast. One of the help that we might have in the future is the drones. That is to say, when we will have drones, you know, technically able to go on every parcel here in the strict slope of Côte-Rôtie and help us, this will probably help us to gain a few hours and move to the organic certification. So because we want to do this very properly, it takes a bit more time, but sustainability is extremely important in our winery. I am always amazed that people talk about sustainability or organic farming regarding vineyards only. People are very surprised when they visit our wineries to be told that 100% of the yeasts that we have inside the vinification cellars are natural yeast, indigenous yeast. So we don't use a single gram of selected yeast at Guigal. And of course, it's concerns that are extremely important to us. So we're moving forward. We're not doing it because it's fashionable. I truly don't care about fashion. We're doing it because we're convinced it's a good way for the vineyard, let's say, to carry on many, many years. And also sustainability is an important word for the future. So, you know, I think it's almost a non-debate to me, because whether you like it or not, because whether you want organic or you don't want organic, it's just a matter of time. We can easily consider that in 10, 15 or 20 years of time, all the vineyards will be certified organic.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that's a really nice note to finish up on. We are running out of time. I don't know if we have time for one last question, because I can see that people need to leave. Our next virtual tasting will be from the Rhone Valley all the way to Bordeaux. So our next one will be in June, and that will be with La Conseillante. Okay, so I'll keep you all posted on that.
So thank you very much, Philippe. It was really, it was wonderful to hear your story and have all these anecdotes about the winery.
It was really special. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you to all for your time, and I hope you had a great moment tasting these wines. And keep in mind that Europe is not that big. So if you have the possibility to come to the Rhone Valley, we will be extremely happy and honored to welcome you at Guigal. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening.
Take care. Cheers.
Cheers.